So what we're going to talk about today is how to use apply to checks inside of Fixups in pdfToolbox. So we already have videos about checks and Fixups. I think we've done cafes about checks and Fixups as well in the past. Most of you who have used Toolbox have definitely already used checks and Fixups by themselves. Today we're going to look at the apply to function that you find in a lot of Fixups. If you know how a fixup works, it is when you want to change something about a document. You're trying to make a change. And that change can be anything. It can be removing stuff, it can be adding stuff, it can be changing colors of objects in the file. Anything that you change using pdfToolbox would be accomplished using a fixup. And sometimes you execute fixups on entire documents. You could use an embed fonts fixup, for example, and you execute that on your document and you're embedding all the fonts in the entire PDF. You could use a fixup to convert colors and you want to convert the entire document to CMYK. And in that case, you can just use the fixup like that and use it on everything. But there are also cases where you want to change specific objects in the file. You don't want to change everything, you just want to change some things, these things that are problematic. In some of those cases, you can still just use certain fixups because some fixups will by themselves only work on certain objects. For example, if you use a map colors fixup, for example, to remap a spot color or to map a certain color to a different color, by the way the fixup works, you will have to configure which color you want to convert. And in the fixup itself, that limits the execution to those objects. The same is true with embed missing fonts. You can tell the fixup in its normal configuration to embed only the fonts that are not 100% embedded, for example, or different parameters. So some fixups already have parameters that limit the execution to certain objects. Other fixups don't. And in those cases, you might still want to limit what you do with them. And that's when you'll find the apply to option. A lot of fixups have that apply to option somewhere in the frame. You'll find it and you'll see that in there, you can select a check. And then what you'll do is you'll limit the execution of the fixup to the check, to the object that hits the check that you have selected in the apply to option. I have 3 examples that I prepared for this cafe where we would use that. They are about removing objects, about place content, and about create and apply shapes. So basically 2 big technologies and remove objects, because it's a really good example for this feature, because the only parameter in the remove objects fixup is the apply to. So we can look at that. I have a fixup here. I'm going to make this zoom thing a bit smaller so it's not in the way for me. You guys can see it, so it's fine. I have this remove objects fixup here that I already prepared, and I can go to edit. And you see the only thing when you make a remove fixup, remove objects fixup is the apply to feature. And then in the apply to feature, I can have a list of all the checks inside my library. Now in this library, I made it specifically for this cafe, so I only have the 3 checks that I want to use. But basically, if we say create new, we get the same new check window that we would get when we're creating a check by itself. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to remove the text from my test file. So I made a check is text inside my remove objects fixup. I'll have to open up a file. So I'll take my file. Keeping tradition, this is the file with penguins in it, and you see it has a bunch of penguins, and it always has a page number in a big thing here. We can have a look at the check that I made, which is text. If I go to edit, I can do a test here, and we can see that effectively we have 1 text element on each of my pages using the font Pooh. And if I look at page 1, I can see that is the number 1 here at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to execute my remove objects fixup with the isText apply to on this file. I'll just say fix, and we'll call that _1. Save it on the desktop, that's fine. There we go. And now we have a new version of the file where the number 1 is gone. Now I could execute the fixup without something here, with just basically any, and then it would remove everything and my penguins would be gone too. And now I kept my penguins, so I only removed the text. So that's basically what it's for. I limited the execution of the fixup to the object that hit my check, which is all the page numbers. So we're going really quick. I have basically already arrived at my second example. And in this case, we're not going to remove things, we're going to add things. So I'm going to use the place contents technology. Again, I have already prepared a fixup here. We can look at it. And it's a place contents fixup, but it's actually place page number. Now, it doesn't really matter which one of these that I use. Any of the place content things would have an apply to somewhere in them. So this is a fixup that has a lot of options. It's not just an apply to, it also has what you want to place. It has which font you want to use. I'm going to use our 4-piece font. It has which font size, what color that font has to be, where you want to place, but it has a lot of options, but you still have at the bottom an option for apply to. And here, again, I made a check, and this check is not page 1. So something that with place content you might want to do is limit the execution to certain pages of your document. In this case, I'm placing page numbers, and I want to have a page number on all the pages of my document, but not on the cover page, because it looks stupid to have that little page number on your cover page. So I want to not do it there. Maybe I don't want it on like the second page either, but I want to have it on all the rest of the documents. So I can make a check for that. I can make a check that only looks at certain pages, and there is several options for what pages you want to work with. You can use basically any of these pages options. You could look at page sizes, stuff like that. In this case, I used sequential page number. I think there is also an existing check parameter for odd pages and even pages. There we go. So we have even pages, we have odd pages, we have empty pages, we have lost page, and specifically I can say sequential page number, then I can say greater than 1, which means anything except page 1 basically will trigger this check. So since I have that here and I have everything else in this fixup already set, I'm going to use this font, this size, this color. I can say, okay, I'm going to fix this. And I'm basically going to place new page numbers on this file, but not using the font Pooh. I'm going to use the font for our 4-piece font. It's done. It did it 7 times because it didn't do it on page 1. But if I go to page 2, then we have our 4-piece font number 2 in the 4-piece green. And I can go to 3, 4, 5, and so on. And I can see all of the page numbers except for on page 1. Obviously, I could also have made that check the other way around. And instead of saying greater than 1, I could have, I don't know, reversed it and made it do everything except 1. I don't know. You can make the check work the way you want to, as long as you are able to hit the pages where you want this check to hit the pages where you want this fixup to be applied. So that is for place content, and it's the same story. You could make this actually pretty intelligent. Right now, I based it on the pages, basically the page number in the file. You could place, for example, QR codes with variable information based on whether or not the page is a title page, and you can find out if your page is a title page by checking the text on the page for certain keywords that you know of, and so on and so on. So you can make these things very complex checks to have them work with this feature. And then I have a third fixup that I prepared for this, and that's a create and apply shapes fixup. So that's another different tool to work with, where you might want to limit stuff. And it's another different example. So in my first example, what I did was I wanted to remove stuff, and I made a check that hits exactly the objects that I wanted to remove. Now, the second thing that I did was I wanted to place content, but I wanted to limit where it was being placed. So I didn't want to place it everywhere. I wanted to limit it to certain places. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new shape on the document, but I want to limit how what my shape is, what is taken into account when I'm creating my shape. So both of these three examples are different limitations that we're placing on it, different ways to use the apply tool. In this case, you see, I don't have the option open right here. I have the create shape option where I choose how I want to create a shape, and I'm going to use tracing page content. Then I have the shape intent. I can choose what of this shape I want to create. In this case, I want to use the inside, which is the object that it's going to hit. And then in the parameters, I have the apply to. So now I have it hidden away in a separate window, but it still exists. And I can do this to limit the objects that it sees when it's tracing my page content. So in this case, I want to create a varnish or an undercolor white or something else. And I want to do that on, just for an example, my penguins, but not the text that I just added with my place contents fixup. So I made a check, and the check is basically everything but text objects. And that's also quite simple to create. We basically made a check for is text is not true, which means every object in the file that is not text is causing a hit. So that is the check I used for this one. The other parameters don't particularly matter. They're just based on how the shape is being detected. And then in the apply screen, I made it make a filled shape in front of my page content, and I make it in 4-piece pink, but I called the color varnish. So if I execute that on this document, and remember, this is the document where I still have those text objects at the bottom, and I say create and apply shape, fix. We save this as number 3. Then it's going to look at the file. This one takes a little bit longer because it's doing that whole shape generation step. It's going to look at the file. It's going to generate those shapes based on that apply to check. So all the objects that hit the check are taken into account when it's generating the shape. And then it's going to place the new shape there. So it's not a very difficult concept to understand, but it does show you how to make more complicated fixups, more specific fixups that do more tightly defined things with your file than you might consider if you're new to pdfToolbox. This is a 4-piece cafe, so feel free to speak up if you have any questions or if you have any examples of where this might be useful. I know most of the people that are here in the live session have quite a bit of experience with the tool, so it's probably not much news for you guys. But you can still unmute yourself and speak up or write a message in chat. This is the awkward moment where I have to fill the empty space in between the execution of the fixup. It's almost there. There we go. So now we have a pink penguin. And if I go to page 2, we'll see that wait a minute, did I make a mistake? The text is affected. I think I made a mistake in how my check works. There goes my preparation. Let's see if we can fix this. That's actually a good thing to do now. So apparently I made a mistake in how my check works because it also puts varnish on the page numbers, and it shouldn't have done that because those are text. So let's have a look at what I did wrong that is causing this. So I'm doing tracing page content, I'm doing inside shape. All but text is the check. So let's look at that check. text is not true. So if I test stuff like this, we should not get matches for the text elements. And it doesn't look like my text elements gave me matches. So they should not have been included. Let me reopen file 2. So we have the right file to look at. There we go. And we'll look at this page because this is where the text element is. Now create and apply shapes. Let's look at the tests for it. Edit. Somehow that camera preview always manages to be where I want to click. There we go. So normally this check should not have hit the page numbers. Maybe they're form X objects. There we go. That's why they're not actually text, they're form X objects. Okay, so that's why it didn't work. So basically, if I want to change this to work with this file, I can change my check to not be all but text, but to be images only, for example. So if I make this different and I don't have all but text, but I say images, and we remove the is text and we say instead this image is true, then we should no longer hit those objects. There we go. Now we only get all the penguins. If I say okay, 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 and then we apply this to, oh, there is something in chat. Yes, about actually the previous one was about applying stuff to certain pages. I'll come back to it in a second. So in this case, I'll first execute this again, and I'll save it as 4, I guess, because I already have a 3. Then this time my varnish should only be created to the penguins and not to the text. Oh, this is going to take a while again, isn't it? Okay, so the question in chat that we saw just now, that I saw just now, because it looks like you guys can see it, is how to apply fixup to certain pages. And in this case, it's not everything but page 1, but a page range, where we say all the pages between 3 and 6, but not 1 to 2 and not 7 to 10, for example. So limiting stuff to a page range is an option that is available for some fixups, but not for everything. And building a check specifically for it without creating a loop in a process plan can be difficult. So in this case, what we could do is we could make a check sequential page number, and we could say contained in lists, I think, and then say 3 to 6 as options. I think that should work. I can have a look at the fixup in a second and see if that option is available. I know page ranges for executions on fixups is something that is always being worked on. So if any of the people from Colors that are present right now want to tell me if I'm saying stuff that is incorrect or want to weigh in on this, feel free to unmute. I can see you in the participants. We'll check in a second when this is done what the options are. There we go. Okay, so now I have the penguins be pink and the text remains green. So this time the fixup did exactly what I wanted it to do. And actually that is a good accident that we have now, a happy little accident, as one of our favorite painters would say. That it happened during the demo, because it shows the importance of using first test mode and testing out your checks and fixups and profiles when you're creating something, and not just saying, oh, this should work, and going for it and throwing it into production because I just made a mistake because my text wasn't text. And then it's not doing what I wanted it to do. So it's always good to do some tests, to try some things. And that's why you have a desktop to do all these things with. Okay, so that is the third example. Basically, I created shapes, but I left out certain objects. In a more production environment, what you would typically use this for is more like the not having your varnish created for your registration marks and stuff like that, for example. But it's the same idea. Hi, Mark.
Yep. Clever guy, you have seen that I have unmuted myself. Hello around. Limiting the shape feature to page ranges isn't possible at the moment. When you look at the respective create shape parameters dialog, there is in brackets, a little bit well hidden, there is page objects.
Right.
So you cannot do a sequential page number check there at the moment. We are working on that. That will be available, let's say after winter and spring, something like that. As you can imagine, there is already a quite complex routine in the background running for all this create and apply shapes fixups, and we didn't focus on limiting it to page ranges. So some technical background regarding that, because it was mainly done for whatever packaging and so stuff, where you have usually only a single page. So that's the reason behind why we limited it to didn't make it possible to limit it to page ranges.
So there we go. Thank you, Mark.
Pleasure.
I'm not sure if the question was specifically about this fixup, but it's definitely good.
And yes, we are working consistently on limiting to page ranges, and I can just invite you here right now to our VIP event in October. There we will talk about things. I've said nothing. I didn't.
I am already registered. But yes, totally. People who are present here or people who are seeing this on YouTube soon after we're doing this webinar, please do check out the events page on the 4Pees website or the Callas website and register for the pdfToolbox 13 release event that is coming up. You should be able to register already, and you will get email notifications whenever more information becomes available about the sessions that are going to be part of that event. So definitely a good point if you want to be kept up to date about new stuff. Okay, so like I said, this was going to be a quick one. It's because the concept itself isn't too hard to understand. It's a very useful and standard feature if you're working with more complex checks and fixups inside pdfToolbox. So feel free to ask more questions in chat or by unmuting yourself. If you want to see anything else, I can make some new checks and fixups if you're interested in seeing something specific. Otherwise, suggestions for future cafes are always appreciated because we have done quite a few of these already. And after a while, it's hard to think of topics. So if you have any suggestions for features that you want to see in future cafes, feel free to email any of us or leave a message in any of our social media. You can comment on these YouTube videos and we will see that as well. And then we will consider it for a future for Pees Café. Otherwise, I will thank you all for being here today and joining us for this webinar. And then I'd like to see you in the next one. I'm pretty sure there is one next week, but I don't remember the subject.
Next one will be on mainly on automation in InDesign, thanks to Axio Made to Print. That one will be done by our Director of Professional Services, Christian Blaise.
There we go. Okay. Looks like there is no extra questions coming in. So thanks again, everybody, for attending. Don't forget to register for the VIP events, the Toolbox 13 release events, and for any future 4Pees cafes. And we'd like to see you again. Hope you have a nice evening and goodbye.